Good morning and thanks, Oz. I'm really privileged to kick this day off. I've always thought very highly of this group. I know many of you, and I know you have a great agenda today. I'm very excited to introduce this panel. This panel is everybody on this panel, as all of you know, are industry veterans. We have a very interesting topic here, the human aspects of adopting AI, talking about the economic rationality of adopting AI, its impact on the legal market, and deployment strategies and challenges, really all the stuff that we're thinking about right now. Um, our first panelist is Gretta Rusanow. She is Managing Director and Head of Advisory Services at Citi Law Firm Group. She co-authored the 2025 Citi Hildebrand Client Advisory, which discusses, among other things, the growth opportunities and challenges for law firm adoption of generative AI. Then we have Toby Brown, who is CEO at Deviate Legal Strategy. He's a board member at Legal Value Network and president of the board at Sally. What Toby doesn't know is that I've been a fangirl or girl fan. I don't know what the phrase, I don't know what the phrase is, of Toby's for close to 10 years now, I think. Toby previously was in the C-suite at an Law 50 firm and really set the benchmark and was a trailblazer for law firm pricing and profitability strategies, which, as we all know, goes hand in glove with innovation and technology. And then finally, we have Sarah Pullin, who's Global Director of Knowledge at Baker McKenzie. She globally leads the knowledge lawyers, the KM managers, the information and research teams, and other global knowledge experts. And she's at the forefront of looking at how we can redefine AI's role in knowledge management. And thanks again to the skills community for allowing us to be the sponsor of this year's program. Again, we're very excited. So with that, Greta, we're going to start off with you. And let's talk about the 2025 client advisory that you authored. And let's talk first about what you all found with respect to, just to set the table, with respect to the financial projections concerning law firm revenue growth in 2025.
Thanks, Katie, and hi everyone. It's a joy to be a part of this. As Oz will well know, I've got a deep and long history in knowledge management, so it's quite nice to be able to come back into this group, which I think I've been a part of since 2002. So in my current role, and it's been my role for 15 years now, I study the economics of law firms, and as Katie mentioned, recently released our 2025 Citi Hildebrand Client Advisory. Look, we're expecting a good year, but let me start by just talking a little bit about what we saw in 24. This will probably come down as one of the best years ever we've seen in this industry. Our early projections are showing that demand growth, which historically is somewhere in the 1.5% growth range, will probably end up roughly around 3% growth, so twice the rate of growth that we would typically see. I think we're expecting revenue growth somewhere around 10%, and double-digit profitability results, whether that be net income or profit per equity partner. So it was a very strong year, and that was even in an environment where transactional work was pretty soft. What we saw, however, was strong performance across a range of other practices, whether it be litigation, regulatory work, particularly antitrust, a lot of funds, investment management work, a lot of bankruptcy and restructuring. And we're anticipating that we'll see broad-based M&A work return. We certainly saw large cap M&A fueling a lot of the AmLaw 50 firms, particularly some of the most profitable firms in the market. And it's just our expectation that as we see a rebound in M&A across all segments of the law firm industry, together with the continued strong performance of those other practices that fueled the strong growth we saw in 24, this is going to be a very good year for the industry. So just pure economics is telling us that we're in for a pretty positive year. I would just mention, I spend a lot of my time these days talking to the managing partners and chairs, executive committees, the EDs and the CFOs of your firms. And we ask them each year to tell us where, what's top of mind for them 2 years out. And that's really the basis of the client advisory text. So let me sort of just bottom line for you that I think there's been very much a growth mindset among particularly the AML 50 firms in recent years, and that is likely to continue. What I mean by that is that in an industry where growth has been hard to come by organically, firms have been understanding that they need to buy that growth from other firms. So we've seen a lot of lateral activity. You've probably seen a lot of movement in the partnerships of your firms in recent years. They're very much of the mindset that they are going to continue to increase their scale through fairly sort of strategic and targeted growth in order to capture more market share from their existing client base, and also more market share by being able to capture work from clients who may not have paid attention to the firms in the past. Once they've done that, they've then got to figure out how to unlock the platform. So it's one thing to bring on a whole bunch of new laterals into the firm. It's a whole other challenge for the partnership to start to build relationships between old and new, and really look at ways that they can go to their existing client base and introduce the full range of services that the firm can now offer. And I just say, and I think, bringing it back to what we're here to talk about, at number 3, in terms of their opportunities over the next couple of years, they talk about the opportunity of digital transformation. And I'd have to say that probably, one of the top 3 topics of conversation throughout all of the hundreds of meetings I would have done last year, my team would have done with law firm leadership, generative AI was absolutely one of the top 3. Growth in general, the growth of the income partner category is another huge area, but no, most definitely generative AI and the opportunities that it will bring to firms is absolutely on the minds of the leadership of your firms. So let me sort of just take you through, we asked them to tell us what the top lessons learned have been in the last year or two of seeing generative AI hit their radars. The first thing that I heard repeatedly last year was that there's a skepticism about the maturity of a number of the generative AI tools that have hit the market so far. But having said that, it's not enough for firm leadership to be dismissive of generative AI. I think the way I characterised it when I was writing the client advisory was, don't believe the hype, but things can change very quickly. So what I heard time and again was that law firms felt that they had a ton of generative AI solutions flooding the market. They felt compelled to assess all of them. And, they describe that as sort of the reverse of a typical technology requirements definition, where in the past you would have defined a business need, then you would have gone to the market and looked at the various technology solutions and assessed which one was appropriate for your business needs. That has just been turned on its head. Now, firms have felt that they've had to try out everything, only to then discover that there's a range in the maturity level of some of these tools. And so there's been this massive time sink, only to then come to the conclusion that some of these tools just aren't quite market ready. But it hasn't dissuaded them from paying close attention. They understand that it could just turn on a dime, and that they must spend the time and the resources looking at these tools. Second key lesson learned is a recognition that there's a lot of human input that's needed. So part of that is the testing of generative AI tools, but also an understanding that there's going to have to be a very significant shift in behaviours. So, it's great if they roll out a pilot. The tool might be seen as sort of a shiny new tool for a while. There's a novelty factor, but just an understanding that firms are going to have to build a whole framework around the implementation and the constant maintenance of these Gen AI tools, and also getting lawyers to change the way they practice law and bring those tools into their way of working. Having said that, lesson number 3, generative AI will likely augment, not replace, the work of lawyers. We asked firms to tell us short-term and longer-term what impact they think Gen AI is going to have on lawyer leverage. There is not a view that in the next couple of years we're going to see a wholesale reduction in the leverage model. In fact, close to half of large law firm leaders tell us that they really just don't know what impact it's going to have over the next couple of years, and for over 40%, they are saying flat out, no impact in the next 2 years. You ask them, okay, what do you think is going to happen a decade out? And the view is still roughly half, a little over half, believe that Gen AI, they still don't know, it's just too soon to tell. But for the rest, they believe that it will have an impact. A lot of firm leaders I talk to don't believe that the leverage model is going to shrink. They just think that the shape of it is going to change. So fewer junior associates, but more demand for senior expertise. So the big question for firms will be, how are you going to develop senior associates, senior lawyers in your business if you're going to have fewer first and second year associates in the first place? So one of the big challenges ahead for them. A lot of effort around building robust governance structures around the use of data with Gen AI tools, assessing the various risks and developing use policies. And I think hand in glove with this is an understanding that, the old adage of garbage in, garbage out is really on steroids when it comes to generative AI tools. I mean, just on a lark, we fed the client advisory into a Gen AI tool, turned it into what sounded like a very sophisticated podcast. And it sounded great, but the content, frankly, was garbage. And yet, if that was released into the wild, it would sound, very authoritative about themes that, the tool clearly didn't really understand. The final lesson learned that law firm leaders are very focused on is just what does all of this mean for the client, and a recognition that it's taken some time to get clients comfortable with cloud computing. We've finally got to that point. They still don't think, or they certainly hear that their clients are not yet keen for their own content to be fed through generative AI tools in general. So that is another issue that's top of mind. A couple of other things I'll touch on, and then I do want to pause because I know we have other speakers here. I know that Toby's going to talk about the impact on pricing. A couple of just comments on that. So far, top law firms tell us, or large law firms tell us, they've spent less than 1% of revenue on generative AI so far. That's going to change. They know that this is going to cost them a lot of money. Meanwhile, they're going to be spending fewer hours producing the work. So the big question, frankly, I think, is how are they going to recover the huge cost associated with generative AI? And if there's ever going to be a push toward value-based pricing, it would have to be this. Having said that, all of our research, and I know Toby's going to speak with greater authority on this, all of our researchers show that for all the talk around alternative fee arrangements, it still only accounts for less than 20% of overall firm revenue. So there is definitely work to be done there. I'm going to pause and turn it over to others.
Yeah, no, I think thanks, Greta, and absolutely, Toby, you've talked a lot about these tensions of the increase of productivity of Gen AI, resulting in smaller margins, and the whole issue of also cost recovery as law firms implement Gen AI tools. So why don't you talk to us a bit about, from the economist perspective, what do you see happening in the legal market as these firms, especially the top 50, adopt Gen AI? And what do you think? Are we going to get rid of the billable model?
Well, thank you, Katie. And also thank you very much for that kind introduction. And I'm also happy to be here. I'll hopefully tie some themes together here. My educational background is economics. So the core economic question I ask is what happens in a service industry that bills on time and materials that experiences a major increase in productivity. And by productivity, I don't mean more billable hours. I mean fewer hours to produce the same output. And to give a quick analogy, in 1900, 40% of the US labor force was employed in agriculture. Today, it's 2%. And that is decades of relentless pursuit of productivity increases. The other aspect of this from economics is this is value creation. This innovation creates value. And so the question, and Greta was getting to it, is who captures that value? So I was fortunate to be partnering with a couple of very good friends of mine, Greg Lambert and Ryan McLeod, and we were able to obtain access to $500 million of billings, legal billings, anonymized legal billings. And we queried it and said, how many of these time entries have the words draft or review in them? Because we figured that those would be the sort of primary targets, not the only targets, but the primary targets of AI. And the answer is 40% of the time entries, but it represented 46% of the revenue. So there is a significant opportunity for value creation and value capture. So what I did was I took an anonymized M&A matter, and I went with what I call a 520, which is I disrupted, which is a kind way of saying I got rid of 5% of partner time and 20% of associate time. Now, do I think that's capable right now? Absolutely not. Do I think it's capable in the future? Very much. Is it a year? Is it 2? Is it 5? I don't know, but that will come. So in that model, what happened was the revenue dropped by 13%, but more importantly, the profit margins dropped by 11%. That's in this specific model. Other models, I've had it range from like 8 to 11%. So we're talking about ROI, and we're talking about all the money law firms are spending on this. What this means is the value capture is now occurring with the providers, not with the law firms. And the ROI is actually negative. Another aspect of this that people don't talk about, and this is that Harvard Boston Consulting Group exercise that was done, is not only is it faster and cheaper, it's better. So when I talk to firms, I say, what this will give you is competitive advantage. If you took this and said, I'm going to full force lay this into an M&A practice, at the end of that, the M&A practice would have immense competitive advantage. And it's not, oh, we're better lawyers. It's a more pronounced competitive advantage. But let's be honest, law firms are incapable and I've written a paper on this. It was cut into 3 pieces, and Thomson Reuters published it. The structure of law firms, they're incapable of being strategic in the deployment of this. So what I'm saying, what other people are saying, is that what law firms are doing, and this will, well, wait, let me take one pause here, because Greta brought up pricing. Everyone's like, oh, we're just going to go to fixed fee pricing. And my answer to that is, that's hilarious. Law firms and legal departments are not capable of billing by the fee. And what I mean by that is, they don't know how to scope, they don't know how to evaluate a statement of work, and they don't know how to manage to changes in scope. So it's literally impossible for them to go, I'm going to charge $100,000 for this. In fact, I can tell you numerous times when I've talked to clients and said, the fee is going to be $100,000, they go, I don't know how to assess whether that's a good fee or a bad fee. So absent them having the skills to do this, going to fixed fees is a fantasy. I don't see how that can happen. I've also heard people say, oh, we'll charge a premium on our hours. Also, not going to happen. There is a market for billing rates. There is data out there. And it's like, you can't just say, oh, I'm going to charge 10, 20% more than the market. The clients are going to go, yeah, no, that's not going to happen. So let's get back to what we're seeing happen. What I'm seeing happen is law firms are, in fact, Ryan, I hope you're okay if I quote you here. He calls this the unholy alliance. And what it is law firm leaderships are saying, COO, what are we doing? We need to be doing AI. And I'll pick on Harvey. The Harveys of the world are selling this stuff. So the COO goes to Harvey and buys 100 licenses. So the COO can go, victory, we're doing something with AI. Harvey is going, victory, we just got a recurring revenue deal with that law firm. So how much value was transferred in that? And I can tell you from talking to a number of firms, the 100 licenses, and I picked that number because it makes the math easy for me, maybe a quarter of those licenses are actually being used to do use cases. Now, what are those use cases? This is even more damning. Most of the firms don't know. They're just, partner X is doing this, partner Y is doing that, partner Z is doing whatever. Now, is all of that value creation in terms of service delivery versus back office? No, but there is some of that occurring where the partner goes, oh, I can take this contract, and with this prompt set, I can review this contract in 1/10 of the time. So they just destroyed 90% of the billable hours in that task. No one's, to my knowledge, measuring that, or if there are, they're extremely few and far between. The last thing I'll say is I sat through, Greta made a comment about sort of the maturity of the technology. I have sat through numerous AI presentations / demos to law firms. Not in any of those did the law firm say, here is what I want to do with this. They just said, show me your AI. So to me, this is completely random. It's not strategic. The last thing I'll say I'm hearing is, and this is really about the people part as this session is on, is pilot burnout. I was at the Legal Tech Fund Summit in December in Miami, and there is just a mass of these popping up. Our AI can do this, it can do that, it can do that. Law firms can only consume so many new applications in a year. And their first push was all these, I'll call them just frontier sort of generic AI tools that don't do anything. You have to figure out what to do with them. So already the lawyers are burning out on this. So sorry, I'm the wet blanket here, but I think law firms are really going to struggle around this. Do I think there is massive value creation? Absolutely. And now I'm going to put just one more little twist here. Do you know who's capturing value right now? Power companies, data centers, chip makers. So law firms are at the very tail end of this value creation chain. And so what is going to be left by the time they figure it out? I don't know. I don't know how long this is going to take. Okay, I'm going to give one last comment. I don't see lawyers, and more specifically law firm partners, fighting this. I see them ignoring it, because you're going to a lawyer, and Katie, I don't know if it was you or Greta who talked about service delivery. you're asking a lawyer to change the way they deliver legal services. Do you know how many of them are going to be willing to do that? The number is very low, because what you're saying is risk your career by changing the way you do the work, and it may lower the quality of your output. They're going to go, yeah, no, I don't have time to do this. I'm doing it the way I do it because it provides outcomes that my clients want. Okay, that was it. I can stop. Thanks, Katie.
Do you think, and this may be a Greta question too, but with Greta, with the projected growth in AI investments in 2025, um, do you think law firms are growing those investments while honing their strategies around AI adoption, or is it still going to be as haphazard in 2025 as it has been previously?
I don't think that they're going to be investing more until they feel comfortable that that the solutions are mature enough. I think what we've seen so far is sort of a bit of dipping your toe in the water. So, that's sort of why I highlight it's less than 1% at the moment. I think like average technology spend at the moment is more like about 4%. So I think what's going to probably happen is that until their comfort level increases, we're going to see a reluctance to spend any more than they have to. There's also, I think, a mindset among firm leaders at least, that it's not worth it to be trying to develop your own tools. It's only a matter of time before there's an industry, a tool that's sort of widely adopted by the industry, and so it's just worth waiting it out. I mean, Sarah might have a very different view. I think there's in my experience, there's a handful of firms like Baker McKenzie who see the value in experimenting at this stage. Might be a good segue for Sarah just to chime in. But
exactly.
I'll preface this by saying there are some exceptions, and Sarah, fortunately, is going to talk about one of them.
Yeah.
But I don't know, Katie, if you saw me actually laugh when you said AI strategy.
Yeah, no, I know, and I understand the comedy behind
that. AI strategy presumes a business strategy.
Yeah.
In my opinion, you shouldn't have an AI strategy. You should have a business strategy that would direct you to how you leverage AI.
Yep.
And firms have strategies, but they're very, very weak, because if a firm comes out, in fact, Katie, your old firm did this. If they come out and say, these are the 3 things that we're going to focus our firm on, 80% of the 77% of the partners in the firm are going to go, that's not me. You just told me I don't belong at this firm. So firms are very hesitant to actually come out with a strategy, a real strategy. I have a friend of mine whose firm I won't name. I'm horrible at naming firms. Was doing an AI strategy group, and I'm like, what sort of BS is this? I mean, if you have a firm strategy, it should. In fact, I'm consulting with a lawyer, and I'm like, you have a bright light that says this is what you want to accomplish. Any AI decisions need to be measured against that to say, does this drive a successful outcome? And in fact, one of the factors that we've identified is speed, because this is a transactional practice, and he's already seeing the speed of business start to increase as clients are adopting AI, and they want their deals to close faster. So speed is one of his filters to say, are we on track? So I'll stop there, and then let's give Sarah.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sarah, I mean, I think one of the challenges for law firms as a whole is that not all of them have the resources to, as Toby said, clearly not all of them, nor a large proportion of them have articulated business strategies. But, beyond that, even if they do, they don't necessarily have the resources to truly evaluate AI tools, or know how to marry the AI strategy with the business strategy. So talk to us a little bit about what your firm is doing, and how you're marrying those 2 strategies, and what you found to be successful versus unsuccessful in that adoption.
Thank you, Katie, and like the others, really pleased to be here today. And you can see the size of the problem and effort that we have, people like myself, in the law firms. And a lot of what was said resonates with me, although I would appreciate being called the exception in terms of our certainly addressing some of those more challenging aspects. But certainly, you've asked me to kind of comment on knowledge's involvement in the deployment and what we're doing at Baker McKenzie. There are a couple of approaches in terms of our deployment, but perhaps picking up on some underlying activities to address some of those comments that have been raised by Gretta and Toby first. First of all, strategic alignment, absolutely. We realised that very early on when looking at the first tools that we were kind of testing and piloting with. There needs to be a really clear understanding of the business need or client use and why you're looking at it in the first place. And as we're all acknowledging, that in turn has to relate back to the firm-wide strategy or business or practice strategy that you're looking at in practice. What we kind of also had to articulate fairly early on is the value we are going after when we are testing and wanting to kind of move forward with that tool. That means that we're from the get-go identifying different data points that we will track through that testing period and report on in order to better understand whether we anticipate we will see the value out of these particular tools that we were looking at. So right from the beginning, identifying kind of what the value is and alignment with this strategy has certainly been very important. Another area that I would call out would be the roles and who's involved and who's not. You mentioned a lot of people don't have a lot of resource there. In Baker McKenzie, we might have specific teams, data analytic teams, machine learning teams, and additional resources coming in which are focusing and kind of experts in these fields. But that said, all of us are turning our attention to helping in terms of testing and experimenting and deploying at the end of the day. Knowledge plays a key role in that. We're embedded in our practices. We understand law, we understand the legal workflows, we understand risk, we understand content, we understand the technology, but also it's very collaborative, cross-functional. Like any other time, this is the moment when the natural cross-functional behavior is kicking into play and really brings the benefits in what we're trying to do in our deployment in Baker's. Roles and responsibilities, part of any AI governance framework and responsible use has been important to identify in our deployment so we know who is doing what, who is responsible and owning. And that really changes from pre-deployment to post-deployment. At post-deployment stage, it has to pass into our practices, into our functional leads to own what is happening on the ground. Otherwise, we are not going to see that value and return on investment ultimately. Just a couple of the other points. Content is massive, of course, and the data that sits behind that. So we're really thinking about and considering what are our critical content sets. What is the content that is going to underpin these tools? Is it in order? And are we really going to be able to leverage the tools if we have the content and data in place? So everyone knows that, but a really important point to make. In terms of deployment approaches themselves, I'll just call two out, and then I'll talk a little bit about use cases before we kind of hand back to you, Katie. First of all, in terms of deployment, we started off by that kind of general AI cycle that I think everybody knows, the governance cycle, starting with identifying the value, going on to think about and prepare the data and the content sitting under that, doing all the risk assessments and security reviews, preparing to move into that testing phase, reporting back, doing a pilot, preparing to launching, and then really importantly, following up on what's the impact on the business, what value are we seeing back out of it and coming all the way back round. That's pretty common out there. That's where we started. It's by far the easiest approach to get comfortable with. You can kind of feel your way around that cycle. And actually, really importantly, in testing, it provides the opportunity to learn and develop our own skill sets as well. So don't underestimate the opportunity of learning as you're doing the testing with third-party tools. The other approach that we use, which is based on that kind of Gen AI cycle, is enterprise deployment. And the only way we're going to be able to do that successfully, particularly in a firm like Baker McKenzie, is by chunking it up. So we have leads for each of our practices, because the way we deploy and what it means on the ground to our lawyers in a transactional or advisory practice will be very different. And likewise, on the business professional side, each of our functions have a lead that are kind of really working out what is the impact going to be, how can we best leverage value from the tools that are coming. On use cases then, we do deploy based on use cases, Toby, just to say it takes work and effort to understand what those are. And also I would say there's a maturity process to those use cases. We now know in order to best leverage value, we have to come at a particular use of tool from a number of different perspectives. So it might be from a practice perspective, a persona perspective, a single use perspective, a large scale perspective, but we do come at it from multiple angles. We're learning that again leverages out the value more than it would do if you just focus in any particular way. I would also add that whilst we start with kind of siloed use cases, ultimately we know all the reports are out there for you to read, that it's actually getting successive multiple use cases into workflows that is going to make that change in behavior we were talking about a moment ago, and really again see the difference ultimately in how our lawyers are successfully using these tools in practice. We are wanting to fully leverage our tech on information and research stacks and our third-party trusted relationships. That's really important to us. But there is also an important space for very bespoke development in particular areas and on particular client matters that are important to us. So it is a bit of both, but certainly we are very, very busy on deploying the general tools and specific third-party tools that we're taking in.
And Sarah, Toby mentioned, and I think we've all felt the pain of this, the difficulty in convincing lawyers to do it in the first place. And you talked a lot about making it easier, making adoption easier, right? Which I think is really critical, and also helping lawyers in practice-specific areas understand the value to their practices. It's not just a training session generally on how this tool works. It's really, personal in terms of how is this going to make your life better. Have you found any other strategies or had experience, that didn't work, where just from an emotional perspective, getting the lawyers to be excited about technology adoption and not fearful of it, or just think it's one more thing that they have to learn that they don't have time to learn?
So yes, I mean, as has been said, we go in very excited to test a tool, and it doesn't always come up to what we're expecting to get out of that. So yes, we have examples of that, and everything we test, we obviously don't move forward. That is the whole benefit of testing. We're very particular in terms of what we test, as we said, in terms of its alignment and its relationship with our trusted third parties. So there is that element for sure. We also know when we get it into the hands of our lawyers, they are expecting it to be, as somebody said to me the other day, the oracle, the silver bullet, the answer to everything. And it's on us to set the expectations appropriately and the mindset as to how to use tools that are performing like that, where they are relevant to be used in that context. Otherwise, their reaction is immediately, okay, this doesn't work, I don't like it, and that's the end of it. So we've had to grapple and know that and anticipate it and get ahead of that, I suppose, to avoid that happening in practice. For us, it's really important around, I think Gretta was saying, verification, augmentation, supervision. And that's the context within which the appropriate use, within which we are launching these tools, and how it's used in advisory and how it's used in transactional will be very, very different. I think there is a report out.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm gonna interrupt you just because we are at time, but I think it's
We are.
a perfect segue for Lucy's next session. And I want to thank all of the panelists this opening session today. This was awesome. And I turn it over to you, Lucy.